Hello.
Hi everybody, it's another What We Read video for this season. We're just really
we're piling them on, and we're probably going to wrap the season soon too, because well, the year isn't turning out so much the way, you know, we were hoping.
I think a lot of us will agree with that.
On that note, we can adjust, and we should. Usually our bookish new year starts during BA, but since that's probably not going to happen this year,
I don't know. We might still keep it around that way.
Yeah,
we'll see.
So we'll see. On that note, more What We Read videos, because we have been reading.
Yes,
by the grace
we have
of
been reading.
the higher powers.
It's all this cold weather. Anyway, I finally read my first classic of 2021, and the book in question is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I actually did not read the physical version of it. I listened to an audiobook version narrated by Michael Sheen. Specifically the reason that I actually listened to that edition.
That is good.
So, The Picture of Dorian Gray, before I went into it, the thing I knew about it was that the main character, Dorian Gray, has this portrait painted of himself. And instead of him aging, the portrait is the one that ages and sort of gains all of the effects of his actions, basically. And there's never really an explanation as to whether that's a supernatural thing or just all in his head. Who knows? I gotta do more research on that. Okay, what I do appreciate about this book is that I can see why it's so thematically interesting. Because just the idea of that alone in the summary is enough to like make you want to chew on that a bit and reflect on what that means or what it could mean. I also thought that it was like a classic version of the stories that I mentioned in a few previous What We Reads, where it's like, you know, it's a train wreck and you just know bad things are gonna happen and that the character is gonna make poor choices, but you can't look away. Because, you know, that's exactly what happened to me. I will say that I was not expecting to roll my eyes so much, because I was like, why is...
Well, I don't know. Oscar Wilde, though.
I think it was because I just thought Dorian was so immature for his age, and I hated seeing him so easily manipulated by the people around him, but also being super naive.
Hundreds of years old?
Well, he starts the novel, I think he's like 21, so he's like young.
Yeah, that's... Yeah.
So it was just like, sometimes the things he or people around him were saying or doing, I was like, really? Really, though? I even had a moment where I was listening to this, and then I texted one of my friends, and I was like, man. Just like, men. That's literally the bottom line. The subtext of this novel was men. Goodness gracious. Anyway, I don't regret reading it, even though it is not one of my favorite classics that I've ever read. I do think like it is the type of story that is better read with someone else, so you can really discuss what's going on with it. And it's actually a really quick read too, because it just jumps timeline a lot, and it also just highlights specific moments in Dorian Gray's life. So would I recommend this one to other readers? I honestly don't know. If the premise sounds interesting to you, maybe check it out. The audiobook was not long at all. It's a little over 3 hours, so not bad, right, in terms of a read. And premise-wise, I mean, there's a lot to chew on, like I said. However, maybe put this a little lower on your priority list when we're talking about classics, because there are a lot of other ones that I've enjoyed way more than this one, to be honest.
Fair.
And that is my assessment of this book.
Awesome. Every time I hear Dorian Gray, it reminds me of A League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Oh, yeah.
If you remember.
I remember the movie, I don't.
But that's going to be a reread maybe soon enough. Thanks for putting that in my head. All right, so I read a couple of Black Widow books because this is the year
of Black
Widow. And not that I was doing it on purpose, but suddenly I realized, I'm like, oh, there is an abundance of Black Widow graphic novels available on Comixology. And I am a little behind on my Black Widow stuff. So I started with Black Widow and the Marvel Girls. It's a great way to start, isn't it? It's a bunch of vignettes, like just sort of collections of like random episodic, you know, one-shot episodes of team-ups, basically. So you've got Black Widow and Storm and fighting the Mole Man, which is like, what? And then there's a Black Widow and Captain Marvel one that involves a little bit of the Red Skull's machinations, etc. So there's even one where Natasha is remembering her, you know, earliest days at the Red Room, and whether she remembers that the Enchantress of Asgard helped her or not, which to me, I'm just like, don't take that away from her. She was a badass. But then upon further thought, I'm like, did it really subvert Natasha's in it awesomeness? Probably not. So overall, not the most, it felt as hodgepodge as the title. I mean, it's as campy and as kitschy as you want to view it to be. But there is something that you can salvage from all of that stuff, if that's your kind of deal. Is it quintessential Romanov reading? No, in my humble opinion. I mean, for those of you who think, oh my god, this is like the pinnacle of like, I don't, and if you're like that, cool. Like, that's awesome for you. I get it. I get why you would think that. But I'm not of that particular leanings, so I will move on to something that I will put out there as Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
With an H.
I know, exactly.
With a little on there. Oh my goodness. Because there's a guttural kind of... Because first of all, can we just say Marjorie Liu wrote this? When you've got these really big names who just also happen to write novels, right? These big writing out familiar sort of titles, you're going to get some good stuff a lot of the time. Because there's something that I feel like a novel writer brings to the comics world that is this distinct kind of flavor that you won't get from somebody who is purely sort of like, I am just like novels, I'm just graphic novels, or I'm just comics all the way through, because the creative processes are a little different. But the core of the stories, the storytelling, it's all about flavor. It's not even about skill. It's what is the spin. And Marjorie Liu decides to dig into an already, like, how much more can you mine Black Widow's past? In the Marvel books, she is roughly about as old as Cap and Bucky, which... Therefore, and in this particular iteration, she and James are together still in that particular era. I'm not going to comment on where they are now. But also at the time, James was... and I call him James because he's so dignified, isn't he? Well, you have to if he's Captain America. And he was. This was... So Steve, I think, was dead at the time. Because why else would Bucky be... Captain. So it happens at around that era, and Marjorie Liu is able to take something that is intrinsically a Black Widow thing, that mines her entire history as the Black Widow, and takes elements from it that you're like, oh my goodness, and it brings such a depth of... It's so deep, and I just realized what I was experiencing was so overwhelming was because there were so many elements that I just couldn't chew on at the same time. This aspect of her past, the implications of this in the present, the way they were able to trigger the events that would make her dig into sort of her past, and all of the crazy, you know, kind of stuff that she's pulled. The one semi-spoilerish, and if you know, you know, there's a Batman Tower of Babel sort of like, you know, kind of spin to this whole story. For those of you who know what that illusion is, I'll stop there because it's too spoilery. But the point is it puts Natasha exactly where you want her. On the run.
Okay. Overwhelming
odds. And her past catching up with her. With very little chance for her actual allies to help. Which is exactly why she's the Widow. And that is why you're going to want to read Black Widow, The Name of the Rose. Anyway, so it's a roundabout way of doing that. Now it's your turn.
Okay, the last book I'm going to talk about in this video is a review book. I got it off NetGalley, thanks to Simon & Schuster. It is a book called A Faux Love Story by Lonely. And this book, it was just so adorable. Okay, so the entire premise is that there are two teenagers, Bao and Lin, and they are from two different families who own two restaurants that are across the street from each other, and they're actually competitors. So Lin's family hates Bao's family, and Bao's family hates Lin's family. It's a whole thing. And these two have encountered each other before, but it's only in their teens where like a chance thing brings them together again to work together on something.
That's cute.
And so they start to unravel like what if they really wanted to be friends with each other, like outside of this whole like thing with their families, what really went down between their families. And you know, they also try to figure out some individual struggles that they're going through.
It's Romeo and Juliet, but with pho.
Basically. So obviously, let's get the obvious out of the way. This book made me want Vietnamese food so badly. Because every single, like, obviously because they both help out at their family restaurants, they were constantly mentioning different Vietnamese dishes. And I'm just like, please stop, because I don't have it right now, you know. And
yeah,
you know
we're
what?
eating Vietnamese tonight.
It was such a cute story. Like, the Romeo and Juliet aspect to it is sort of there, but not really. It's not a big factor in it. What this story really is more about Lin and Bao specifically dealing with, you know, developing feelings for one another, but also dealing with their personal individual struggles with both of their families. They're trying to figure out what they want to do with their futures. Well, at least Bao is. Bao is trying to figure out what he wants to do in the future. He hasn't really had the chance to like find his thing, if that makes sense, like what thing he wants to do. And that is explored in this book. There's also Lin, who knows what she wants to do, but it's not something her family would look kindly upon because it's not one of those stable careers like being a lawyer or being an engineer or being a doctor. She wants to be an artist, and that's a hard thing to do because her parents want something that's with more stability.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think that Lonely does a great job not only giving you like this cute like romance that blossoms between them, but she's also giving you a good job to see how their individual family dynamics are very similar but different. Bao's journey and Lin's journey are very different because of the said dynamics, but also because of their personalities and how they feel about going after what they want, or, you know, while they're trying to figure out what they want. And I just, like, I loved every single thing about it. I love the secondary cast, I love their friends, I love their families, even when the families were super frustrating. I found the different family dynamics super relatable. and by family dynamics, I mean the internal family dynamics.
Yeah.
Like, while all Asian cultures handle things very differently, there are certain aspects that are very similar across the board for most of us. And to see them struggle with certain things where I felt like I have seen other people, I know people who have gone through the same thing, or I have gone through the same thing.
Yeah, it's...
and I was like, I get it, I understand.
It's
like,
interesting
I feel
patterns.
Yeah, there's a lot of like interesting stuff. And then to watch their love story, it was super cute too. It was funny because like every time something happened between the couple, I would text back and be like, this sounds awfully familiar. Because a lot of the hallmarks, like the big milestones of their relationship, are also milestones that were the start of my relationship with Maggie. So I also was like, oh, this is cute. Throw in a dash of the food and some art and maybe some writing. And honestly, the story was just perfect. I think it would be such a great read for Valentine's Day, specifically for the month of February. I also just think in general it is a very cute YA contemporary that deserves to be checked out. So you should definitely do that. It is a little bit on the longer side, a little longer than I would have liked, but I didn't really feel that length too much because I was enjoying it too much. So obviously, if you couldn't already tell, I really enjoyed A Fall Love Story and I think you should check it out.
Carrying on the whole, when you got a big name writer doing some well-known property.
Sure.
Ta-Nehisi Coates has done a lot of awesome stuff for Black Panther.
Yeah.
What I did not know until recently, because again, I sort of don't go trolling too much sort of for stuff, is that he actually did a run with Captain America. About 4 volumes worth. I'm already done with the first 3, and I kind of almost wanted to save this review until I had the 4th. But you know what? Let's leave that. Let's see how we conclude. So call this part 1. So Ta-Nehisi Coates managed to take Captain America right at the time. I think that he was doing Black Panther as well, because I think they loved what he did with Black Panther, and they're like, you got to do that for Cap. And they set his run with Captain America right after the big Marvel arc called Secret Empire. And to understand why it's important that this Ta-Nehisi Coates was the one to fix it, and I say fix it, we have to understand what happened in Secret Empire, which roughly is this: some crap went down with the Time Stone or the Reality Stone or some Infinity Stone. I don't know. They all caused so much damage by themselves. Where a time displaced-ish Steve Rogers, who did not grow up to be a good patriot, but whose mother was actually Hydra, gets ported into sort of like, yeah, it's the main world, and so this caused a lot of hoo-ha with the community, because first of all, it was a PR nightmare, right? Like, how do you not spoil an arc in a world where, in this world, where people at the time were already starting to get up in arms about just about everything. And so the internet found it incredibly disrespectful that an American created by a couple of Jewish, like sort of writers, ends up becoming a Nazi Hydra person. How do you subvert that kind of thing, where at one point in time Cap actually goes Hail Hydra and starts taking over the world and allows Hydra to actually do it? That's what happens. Secret Empire sort of ends with, taking down this faux Captain America by actual Steve Rogers, and I don't have the time to get into how actual Steve Rogers got in, but we're talking about a United States that is reeling from the effects of being taken over by Hydra, with this sort of like Führer figurehead looking exactly like Steve. So it's Steve's mug as disturbing, like the poster child for Hydra, which is disturbing. It's like, I think it's brave storytelling. I think it's a great discernment. But is it something you want to do to fans in the main storyline? I don't know. So Ta-Nehisi Coates comes in and he's like, we're going to try to make it all better. And he does. So this is Steve. And again, just like with Natasha, what makes Natasha Natasha? What makes Steve Steve? And I think Ta-Nehisi Coates is able to put Steve in exactly the situation that he wants to be. Completely cut off from all of the other allies. And having insurmountable odds once again. But with the difference with Natasha and sort of like, I'm the Black Widow. With Steve, it's more, but what is the thing that I am standing up for? And the coolest thing there is that he's not doing this alone. Yeah. He's doing this with an also kind of time displaced-ish Sharon Carter, who he's with. And in this one, Sharon has aged up. Sharon has been trapped in some weird-ass hell dimension, or whatever. That's a Buffy verse speak there. Or whatever. She comes back, she's like super old, but Steve's just like, I don't care, I love you. And so they're still together. So to get Captain America back on track, not even Captain America, to get Steve Rogers, the man behind the shield, back on track, Sharon Carter and the Daughters of Liberty. Gotta love that. I mean, never has there been a more fun girls, girls squad, girls club, then it's even like almost patronizing to call it that.
True.
Unless it's done unironically, which I never use it, ironically in the first place, because them girls are badass, and they're the ones who are telling like Cap no, like it's basically the dynamic for like a couple of things, and so for them to sort of like help Captain America come back to the vision of, and that's why they're called the Daughters of Liberty. It is about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's freedom. That's the American. It's Captain. That's what he's all about. And for them to sort of like, let's remember who and what we fight for. Forget the figurehead. Who is the man behind that? Who is the man that champions that dream, that legend? It's Steve Rogers. And honestly, I kind of want to see Evans do it. I do. I think he's got the acting chops to be able to pull off that kind of conflicted, especially having watched Civil War again recently, where he's just like, you just tell them, you move. That's basically this. Although technically Steve had to move because he's like, I have to move away from Captain America. It's this whole convoluted thing. But the point is, it's great. Read volumes 1 to 3. They're out now on Kindle Unlimited. Volume, I want to say 4 will end with its last issue on Kindle Unlimited being released sometime in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. In which case you will have read maybe the full run. I don't know if Ta-Nehisi has a volume 5. I'll find out soon enough. I just like these when they come my way.
Okay, I guess that's the end of this week's What We Read video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have thoughts on any of the books or comics mentioned in this video, feel free to leave them down below. In fact, if you want to talk about Marvel, tell us who your favorite is, whether it's a villain or a hero, because I am curious. To me, it's kind of telling sometimes, just to find out who everyone loves the most in the Marvel universe.
Yeah, like little children especially love Loki because he's so cool and edgy, but I'm just like, he's kind of a jerk, but all right. You know what I mean? Like, he's cool.
My favorite is Black Panther, in case you were wondering. At this particular junction in time, Black Panther is my favorite Marvel hero. Well,
specifically Chadwick Boseman's Black Panther, because in the comics he was married to Storm for a huge spell. And yeah, but I like Chad more.
That's fair. Anyway, we will see you guys with another video soon. Bye!
Bye.